Levi's villa unit belonged to Lot 888. Unbeknownst to Ashton and his men, the troops had formed a squarish formation surrounding the lots of A87, A88, A89 to B88. Each of them stood on full alert, armed with fully loaded firearms that are ready to fire the first strike. All they need was a command. Outside the villa. So what's the situation now? Ashton was still grinning his grotesque grin as he taunted Levi. Where are your men? Are they all having cold feet now? Levi signaled with a click of his fingers. The next moment. Thud. 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 The ground seemed to move under their feet as a synchronous marching of troops roared across the silent air. What's going on here? What's all that sound? Trey's men looked around frantically, bug-eyed and tense as dogs. The marching was getting denser and louder, the rhythm was so uniform and disciplined that it almost turned into a deafening boom. What the hell is that? Trey's men froze when they saw the approaching troops coming at them from four corners. Matthew, Trey, and Ashton were shell-shocked and rooted to the ground like statues. Everybody was muted with horror. Never had they seen such a formation in front of their eyes. The soldiers aligned themselves in uniform rows, each armed with the deadliest weapons fit for a war. Thud. 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 The thumping continued. Soon the troops stood in position, forming a human barricade as they occupied the four corners and fenced everybody in. Everyone lifted their guns and aimed their barrels straight at Ashton and his group of men. Crack! Racks of heavy machine guns were set up with their positions adjusted accordingly to point straight towards Ashton and his men. Not to mention those massive weapons that include mortar and artilleries. Clang! Clang! The clanging sound of rods and other metal weapons resonated in the air. Trey's men had dropped their weapons and raised both hands in fear. A few of them had even pissed inside their pants. A strong, pungent smell of ammonia suffused the air. Trey himself had dropped the walnuts and lifted his hands as well. For decades, he had ruled the underground triads with his brutality and violent means. He had seen it all and had never been fazed by any opponent. He could take down dozens of men in one go, breaking their ribs and even slashing their throats. These were all cakewalk to him. Yet the scene in front of him belonged to a totally different league. War that was confined to the television was now playing out right in front of his eyes. Thump! Matthew dropped to the floor on his knees and pleaded, "Please let me go. I have nothing to do with this." Ashton stared at the guns pointed at him. Those soulless clanks of metal stared back at him like a plethora of ghostly eyes. It made his face turn ashen and his legs wobbled with fear. And neither do I. I have done nothing as well. The unexpected twist of events had absolutely stupefied Ashton. He had never imagined Levi could summon an entire regiment with just one phone call. Zoe was blown away as well by the dramatic turn of events. She needed a while to recompose herself before she turned her gaze to Levi. She felt like she saw a magical halo glowing above Levi. How is it possible that he summoned such a huge regiment with just a phone call? A man stepped forward among the troops. He had 2 gold stripes and 3 stars embroidered on the shoulder of his military uniform. They could tell he was an army official. Stephen Shaw, Colonel of Northampton's 1st Metallic Regiment, reporting for duty, sir. We are here to protect the god of war, sir. Stephen Shaw cast an ambiguous glance at Levi as he raised his left hand to present a military salute. Another man in military uniform stepped up from the opposing direction. He had a large gold star embroidered on his shoulder and a group of soldiers at his heels. He had the colossal air of a warrior. He was none other than the King of War. The 1st Metallic Regiment had completely surrounded the compound. General Azure Dragon. Reporting, sir. Awaiting further orders, sir. Stephen Shaw ran up to Azure Dragon and present another military salute. Azure Dragon took off his gloves and asked in his impersonal voice, "Do you know who owns this villa?" "See, could it be that it belongs to the G-God of War?" replied Ashton with a tremulous voice, while his body jerked uncontrollably as if he was having a seizure. "Bingo." Azure Dragon gave a set smile. "All the villas in this area belong to him." Ashton sucked in a deep breath. He was so gripped with fear that he almost passed out. Trey was palpitating in horror when he heard the name. It drained his face of all color and immobilized his body. It was as if his soul had departed and left him with a hollow shell. He would have never dared to step foot in here if he had known this area belonged to the God of War. It was as good as stepping into the gates of hell. "Why did you bring your men here?" Azure Dragon glared at Ashton and Trey. "Are you trying to take down the God of War?" he snarled.